Hello, Jack Bruce there in lovely England. Jack, let's start. Both your parents were musical?
They were indeed, yeah. My dad was a very fine piano player in the sort of style of Fats Waller, who he loved very much. He used to play a lot of that kind of stuff, but he could play anything really. He was good at parties. And my mum, who was my first teacher, she taught me a lot of the old Scottish folk songs and Robert Burns and all that when I was but a kid. So I literally learned at my mother's knee.
Did your mother play an instrument as well?
No, she just was a singer, and a lovely singer too.
And did your father play by ear?
He wasn't trained. He just had a really great ear, which is probably the most important thing you need in music, really. But he could play great, and he swung like the clappers, as we say.
Did he play professionally as well?
No, he never did that. He was just a working guy in a factory. But at parties, he was good. I never had any lessons or anything like that. It just seemed to be a natural.
Do you know about your grandparents as well?
Well, I knew them. I knew one set of grandparents. My mother's parents were both dead by the time when I came along. They were gone. But my father's parents I knew. My father fought at Passchendaele, and he lost an eye there and got gassed. It had a big effect on him, obviously. But he was still a fine man, and I remember them very well, yeah.
You were born in Bishopbriggs,
Bishopbriggs, yeah, Bishopbriggs, yeah.
So whereabouts in Scotland is that? North, south, east, west?
That's very close to Glasgow. In fact, it's really part of Glasgow now. When I was born there, it was a little village just outside Glasgow, and it was a kind of mining community, strip mining. Not a lovely place. But yeah, very close to Glasgow in those days, and now it's really just all been swallowed up by urban, by Glasgow getting bigger.
The urban crawl, as we call it.
Yeah, that's what it's called, yeah. Very sort of normal working class kid, me. Nothing fancy.
And so, I mean, you're being trained by your mother and all that. Obviously you enjoyed it because you continued.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think because she was singing to me, I just started singing, and then I had this voice, which I had from when I was very young, so she realized there was something there, and she took me to some proper teachers, and I joined a choir and things like that, and then I went on from there when I went to school.
This is high school?
Yeah, I was actually singing when I was at primary school, but I was singing in a choir, not in the school, but separate, where I was growing up, where I was living. But once I got to high school, that's when I started getting more interested in learning an instrument.
And which instrument did you start with?
Well, I started with the piano because we had an old piano in the house, and I used to play away on that. That was my first instrument, just playing by ear myself. And then there was a double bass in the school that everybody always ignored. And I just started playing on that, and I really liked the sound of it. So the school got a teacher in for me. But the teacher said, look, you're too small. You can't play this yet. You'll have to come back in a year when you've grown a bit. So that's what I did. And in the meantime, I started to learn cello, which is smaller than the double bass, obviously. I was learning cello, and then I went back on the bass. So I was learning them both at the same time.
That was good of the school to get a teacher for you.
Yeah, it was a good school. Musically, it was a very good school. And there was a really good music teacher there, Mrs. Kidd, and she was great. They went to the trouble. In those days, they did things like that in schools. And yeah, I got a teacher to come in once a week for me, both cello and bass. Did
Mrs. Kidd live to see your success?
Yeah, she was around. I haven't seen her for a long time, but I don't know if she's still around, but I wouldn't be surprised. One of those very great women, she did a lot for music in the city of Glasgow. She was good, yeah, definitely.
You won a scholarship to the Royal Scottish Academy of Drama and Music, is that right?
I did, yeah. I got a scholarship to the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, as it's called. It was very traditional when I went there, but it was great to win a scholarship. I got it for composition and harmony and cello.
So were you writing songs already?
I was writing music, not songs as such, but then that's where I kind of had problems at the college because they didn't really like the direction I wanted to go in, which is more into improvised music and jazz, and I was very interested in that, and very modern classical music, which they didn't really want to encourage. So I kind of fell out with the college, and they said, and also the other thing was I was working in a dance band professionally, and that wasn't allowed. So they said, you either have to give up playing professionally or leave the college. So I said, okay, then I'll just leave. I wanted to move on anyway. funny thing is, after having dropped out of the Academy of Music, they gave me a doctorate a few years ago. So I'm actually a doctor of music from that.
Well, it's nice to talk to you, Dr. Bruce.
Well, if you've ever got any sick music, just bring it along to me and I'll fix it right up.
Oh, you're a music doctor. Now I get it. So, Jack, what next after they threw you out of that college?
Then I decided to move to London. First of all, I joined a big band in Coventry in England, and I joined that band, and that was a great band. Great experience for me learning while being professional. Then we moved to Italy with that band. We did some work there. Then I worked in a smaller band on the American bases in Italy. Then I went back to London and tried to get into the London scene.
As we know that you did break into the scene, so how did you do it, Jack?
Well, I was just very determined. I wanted to be as good a bass player as I wanted to be, but I also wanted to be a composer. And my big hero was a guy called Charlie Mingus, a great bass player and composer and band leader. So I wanted to do that. That's where I started, was playing in jazz in London. Then one of the guys in the band is called Dick Hextall Smith, and he was playing with a band called the Alexis Corner Blues Incorporated. So he said they needed a new bass player, and I went and auditioned for that, and I got the job. The drummer just happened to be a guy called Charlie Watts, and so that was a great band to be in.
Charlie Watts, I wonder who he is.
Don't know what happened to him. I think he's still in the business somewhere. He must be getting on a bit, though, like me. Charlie's still a mate of mine. I still see him from time to time, because we go way back to that band. That was very early 60s. He used to let me sleep on his couch and things like that, because I was just starting out. Then I think his girlfriend didn't like it anymore, so I had to move on. But we're still very good friends.
Where did you move to, Jack?
I just got a little room in London. In fact, that was with a great piano player called Johnny Parker, who used to play with Humphrey Littleton's band. I just got a room in his flat.
Well, Alexis Corner is very famous for sort of bringing blues to England in a way, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was really Chris Barber. He never gets the credit for it. There's a great band leader, English band leader, who's still around. He's really getting on now, but he's a great guy. He used to be a racing motorcyclist, trombone player, and he was the one with his band. He brought over people like Big Bill Broonzy and Lead Belly, and Alexis Corner used to play with Chris Barber. Alexis Corner and Cyril Davis. And then there was Lonnie Donegan. He used to play in that band too. That was the way it all started, really, in the London blues scene, was those Americans coming over and playing with people like Alexis, yeah.
And so was there one sort of focal point? Was there a place where they all played, or was there different clubs and bars?
So there was a few places. There was slightly before my time. I hadn't hit the scene yet when that was all happening. But when I joined Alexis, we used to play the Marquee Club. We used to play there on a Thursday, and then on a Saturday we played at the Ealing Blues Club. And those two places where it all started, Mick Jagger and people like that used to come and sit in with us. There was all sorts of musicians around in that scene at the time. Very exciting time to be young and be around in London, you know.
I'd like to use the word seminal. It was a seminal time.
Probably was. I mean, I was only 19, so I didn't know much about what was going on, except I was having a great time.
Yeah. How long were you in Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated?
What was that? About a couple of years, really. And then we left. This guy called Graham Bond. One day I came in for a rehearsal with Alexis. He was looking very unhappy, Alexis was. So I said, "What's wrong, Alexis?" And he said, "Well, you must know, you've left the band." And I said, "What do you mean I've left the band?" It turned out that Graham Ginger Baker was the drummer by that point. So he had handed in our notices. We had resigned from the band because Graham said we had. So I became part of this Graham Bond organisation. Alexis was very upset with me for years. It took years to become friends again.
Yeah, right. It was nice of Graham to let you know, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I got to find out.
Graham started the Graham Bond organisation, and so were you playing similar stuff to what you were doing with Alexis?
It was a bit more modern, really, for the time. What we used to call R&B. It's obviously very different from what R&B is today. Rhythm and blues there's many different kinds of guises. Louis Prima, that was called rhythm and blues. That was more like jump music or shuffle music or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, we were playing, it was much more modern, very intense, organ-based band by the time Graham happened. And obviously it was Ginger and myself, Dick Hexel-Smith, Graham Bond. It was a very powerful band.
That's when you switched to the electric from playing upright to...
That's right. Yeah. I started off playing upright with that band, and then I got asked to do a session with a Jamaican guitar player called Ernest Ranglin. He's a very important guy in Jamaica. He helped to start the careers of people like Bob Marley and all that. It was a great opportunity, but he said he wanted me to play bass guitar. I not really had been interested in the bass guitar, but I thought, well, I'll see how it goes. So I borrowed a bass guitar and did the session on that, and I just fell in love with the bass guitar immediately because it's a lot smaller and a lot louder.
It's got frets too, hasn't it?
Well, at that time it did. Yeah, I don't use frets much now, but then it did, yeah.
You usually use the fretless bass now?
Yeah, I do mostly now, but not always.
Graham Bond, I suppose, I mean, if you wanted to plan your career, you're doing exactly the right thing, from going from Alexis to Graham Bond, which is more modern, and maybe I can tell that what you're doing is you're coming forward into time. The Graham Bond stuff is, especially because it's keyboard-based, it just sounds a lot more modern than what you'd been doing, to my ears anyway. I'm not a musician, by the way, Jack.
No, I think you're right. I think that's how I would put it. I think Alexis's band was more like a kind of traditional blues. That was when it was a really great band, the Alexis band, because of Cyril Davis, who was one of the most fantastic harmonica players that I've ever worked with or even heard, because he was so good that Muddy Waters asked him to join his band.
You're not a bad harmonica player yourself, but very sadly, Cyril died tragically very young, didn't he?
When I joined with him in Alexis's band, he must have known he was dying because he became very erratic. He was drinking a lot and he wasn't looking after himself. He was actually a working guy. He was a panel beater for a proper job, and then he just played at night. Alexis gave Charlie and me, he gave us the job of looking after Cyril because he was getting too drunk and we had to look after him, and it was hard work because he was a big guy. Trying to get him home and everything, you know. But he must have known he was dying. He just didn't care anymore. It was very sad.
A brain aneurysm, I think, got him in the end or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something very sudden in the end. But I think he also had leukemia. I'm not too sure. He wasn't a well guy and he knew it.
So it was an enjoyable time with Graham, because I've read things about Graham that he was a bizarre chap, to say the least.
Yeah, it was a strange time, but for me, it was like my learning time. I was in that band for about 3 years, I think. It was a long time anyway. We played everywhere in Britain. We played like 300 gigs a year, you know. A lot of good experience for me. Enjoyable, the gigs, yeah, but it was hard work. But it's a good way to learn. When you came to England, did you ever have to have a day job yourself? Me? No, I never actually had a day job. For a little while I was still in Glasgow, I worked as a window cleaner. There was a couple of musicians that I happened to know who were similar to me, young guys. They knew this guy who had a window cleaning business, so in order to make ends meet, we used to skive around, really, clean windows.
Well, lucky Glasgow didn't have many skyscrapers. Well, that would have been great. There's a lot of skiving to be done in those. Oh, dear. I'm scared of heights myself. So getting back to old Graham Bond, he sadly departed a long time ago as well. But so what happened to the Graham Bond organisation, Jack? I left Graham Bond because, well, I sort of fell out with Ginger, really. We had a kind of disagreement, and in the end, I thought I'd better leave the band. So I left the band. Then that was when I joined John Mayall's band. I was with John Mayall for about 7 months or something. And that was when I first met Eric. He was in the Blues Breakers when I joined, but he didn't stay very long. We played a few gigs together, but Eric was planning to go on this famous world tour that he wanted to travel around the world. So he took off, and so he wasn't in the band anymore, which was a big shame for me, because obviously I loved playing with him. He's the best guitar player I'd ever had. Had you bumped into him before, the Blues Breakers, at all? I hadn't bumped into him before, no, because I was in a slightly different scene, and we were working so hard, I never had a chance to see very much of anything, you know. He left, and in fact, he only got as far as Greece.
He saw this butcher shop and there was this lamb hanging up with all these flies crawling over it. And he said, I'm going home.
Yes, the bad meat sent him home, huh?
Yeah, he didn't like the flies.
Just before John Mayall, Jack, you did a solo single, I'm Getting Tired of Drinking and Gambling.
I did. In fact, somebody played that to me recently, just over the phone. The other one is the Rootin' Tootin' track that he played. Now, that was actually, it sounded not too bad. I haven't heard it for a long time. It's very beginner's music, but not quite as bad as I thought it was.
Did somebody pull it or think, look, we can make a pop star out of you?
No, that was Robert Stigwood, who had been the manager of Graham Bond. And after I left Graham Bond, he probably thought I had, because I was a young guy, that could have had a future as a kind of pop star, you know. That wasn't what I wanted to do anyway.
We're skipping forward a little bit. Another Australian, and you probably heard that he sadly died. I think he died in December of last year, and that was Martin Sharp.
Yeah, it's very sad to hear that.
They made a little documentary on him because he still lived, because, you know, he came from a very wealthy family. And
No, I didn't know that.
Yes, came from a wealthy family and they still had the family home. It was a big home. It was just full of stuff. And
right.
He had emphysema. And you know what, Jack? He still had the fag in his mouth.
Wow. That's pretty crazy, but there you go. You know, I didn't know him that well, but he did create a lot of waves, let's put it that way, when he was over here. The Oz Trial.
And of course he did a few of your fabulous covers.
He did do that, yeah.
But let's get on to, so Eric left John Mayall. So was that your cue to leave as well, or what happened there, Jack?
No, I stayed with John for a while after that. Eric left, and then another guitar player came in, a young guy whose name escapes me. I stayed for a few more months with John Mayall, and then I got an offer to join Manfred Mann band. So I was just getting married at that point. I thought it would be interesting to be in a real pop band and maybe make some money, you know. So I joined that for a while, and we had one number one hit while I was with the band, which was a song called Pretty Flamingo. I played on it and I sung backing vocals with Paul Jones. Paul Jones remains a very good friend of mine to this day. He's a very fine guy.
He's a great singer too.
He's a great singer and he's a very Christian guy, but nevertheless he's a very, very nice person.
He doesn't throw the Bible at you then?
He does, but I duck.
Good on you, Jack. That would have been quite heartening too, because you'd been, I've got here 1966, so you were basically at it for 4 years and finally a bit of commercial record success comes your way. Gratifying for you?
Yeah,
Did you feel?
It was interesting to be in that band, but to be honest, the thing that was really better for me even than that was slightly before that. I played with Marvin Gaye. And Marvin Gaye was really encouraging about my bass playing. In fact, he asked me if I wanted to go and work with him in the States in his band. He came round to my little flat in West Hampstead in London, and we just talked all night about music. I would probably have done that, but as I said before, I was getting married. I couldn't go at that point. But that was just so encouraging for me because I felt I was on the right track musically. And that was great encouragement as somebody of that stature would like what I was doing.
But you stayed and got married, and was it a big wedding or just family or very...
Oh, no, very small wedding.
And so this is while you're still with Manfred Mann?
Still with Manfred, I think, then, yeah.
About 6 months or so that you stayed with Manfred?
Something like that. It wasn't a tremendously long time, but that was when Ginger wanted to form a band with Eric. And he asked Eric if we would form a band with him. And Eric said, yeah, I'd like to do that, but Jack's got to be in the band. Because Eric used to come down and see us with Graham Bond sometimes. I think he liked what I was doing, particularly. And of course, what I was doing with Ginger as a rhythm section, he thought that was pretty great. So anyway, Ginger, who as I said before, I'd fallen out with, he then came and asked me if I wanted to join this band. So I said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So we went round to Ginger's house in a place called Neasden, which if you knew London, you would make you laugh because it's a funny part of London for some reason. And so we set up in his front room and started to play, and from the word go, we just knew there was something magical there, something very special. And I remember it was all those little kids, because behind Ginger's house, there was a place called the Welsh Harp, which was a little lake. All those kids could hear the music, so they all came up and stood outside the windows listening. It was very nice. So that was how the band started.
Had Ginger, had he just left Graham Bond, or where was he before you guys?
Yeah, he'd been with Graham, and then Graham, I think, split, and the Graham Bond organisation fell apart, as it were. So I think Ginger had some success. He wrote the B-side of a single for Georgie Fame, which was a bit of a hit, and he got some money, and that's when he wanted to do this.
Initially, what were your differences with Ginger? Was it musical or was it personal?
Purely musical.
Okay, you wanted to go one way and he wanted to go another way, sort of thing?
Yeah, he thought that I was playing too many notes. I was playing too busy, or whatever you want to say. I knew that what I was doing was what I wanted to do, because the people that I loved, the bass players that I loved, were people like James Jamerson from Tamla Motown, and that's what I wanted to do in my own way, was to play melodic bass and bring the bass more to the front of the band.
He was thinking that you were hogging the limelight.
In a way, he just, I think when I was playing bass guitar also, people can hear the bass. So he probably hadn't heard what I was doing before, but people were also very interested in what I was doing on the bass. And he didn't seem to like that much. But anyway, he came and asked anyway, and I said, yeah, fair enough. And the rest is history with that band, really.
Cream has gone down as the first supergroup, and I have a daughter. She's 10 years old, and even she knows Sunshine of Your Love, and she likes it because Jack, there's another Jack, a relation of mine, Jack Black, a movie called School of Rock, and...
Oh, yeah, she likes it from that.
She likes it from that. And she, I tell you what, Jack, she says, I hate Dad's music. I hate what Dad listens to, but I like that. She likes that.
Well, that's healthy. I mean, all my kids, they have to like what I like, otherwise they get beaten within, an inch of their life. No, I mean, to be honest, I learned so much from my children over the years. My daughter, for instance, she introduced me to things like Cypress Hill, which I might not have heard, and then the tradition is kept up with my son, who's now 21. He introduced me to what he has been listening to, which influenced me to make Silver Rails, my new album. So that influence, for me, goes both ways. I influenced them, but they then influenced me back.
What did your 21-year-old son listen to that influenced you?
A band called Om. There's a couple of bands that he likes. One is called Om, O-M, and the other one is called Earth, which I really like very much. And he loves that kind of music and also plays it. He's a drummer and he plays it. And, he played me a couple of things when he was home from uni at one point about a year ago. And that's when I was planning to make this album. So there's this very big influence on the album. It very much goes both ways in our house. Everybody's entitled to listen to what music they like. In fact, I remember I had to go along to my older daughter's school once. She's grown up now and married, but when she was at school, I had to go along and see the headmaster, and he said she's been playing this kind of music, and it was gangster rap.
Oh, dear.
The first word would be imprintable.
Yes.
Sort of thing. So he said, could you get her not to bring us to school? So I learned a lot from my kids. It goes both ways. If you're open, it's very good, very natural, isn't it?
Yeah. So, Jack, after Cream sort of mutually agreed to break up because you did the Goodbye album, how did you feel? Where you think, well, you left the safety of the group and you're on your own?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a bit of that because, like, being friends with Charlie and people like that and knowing Mick and Keith, actually, the bass player lives not far from here where I am now, the old bass player from the Stones. So I know all those guys really well, and that is like a safety blanket, being in a band like that. And obviously, if Cream had been that kind of a band, it would have been remarkable. We would have kept going and all of that, and life would certainly have been a lot easier. But that's not what I wanted to do. It's also not what Eric wanted to do. I think Ginger would probably have liked to have carried on for longer, but both Eric and myself felt that we had said all we had to say in that format. I wanted to have a bigger band to play. The songs I was writing needed a bigger band, needed horns. I felt the band had run its course. If we'd just kept together just to make money, that wouldn't have been us. We were never into it for the money. Although we made a lot of money, it was not about that. And that's the way I've had my career ever since. I play the music for the music's sake and not for the money, not for the commercial thing. Yeah, I just like a lot of different stuff, and I like to write a lot of different stuff and to play it as well. get bored playing one kind of thing all the time. So instead of playing in a lot of different bands now, I only play in about 2 or 3 bands.
You've kept it down to 2 or 3 now, huh?
Yeah, and on my records and things, on my gigs, I play this different kind of music. I have an 8-piece band, so that means I can play more or less anything that I want. I can play piano, I can play lyrical songs, I can play harder bluesy rock, you name it, I can do it. That's what I like. I like to swap around a lot.
This is your 14th studio album, I've calculated, Jack.
Yeah, so I believe, quite a lot.
And that's not counting all your live albums and all that sort of stuff. This is your latest.
I love this record so much. Like most artists, you like what you're doing now. I'm still in love with this new one, Silver Rails, which means a lot to me.
So tell us about it, Jack, because it's been a while. It's been about 10 years since you last...
But I think it's more like 11 years.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about, so what inspired you? The kids inspired you, did they?
Well, that was really asked to do it by the record company, Esoteric. The guy there who runs that company is called Mark Powell. He just asked me one day if I fancied doing a studio album. And I hadn't thought about doing a studio album because I was so busy touring for years. I still haven't managed to get to Australia, but I've been touring a lot and I hadn't thought about recording. I thought it was a great idea. So I just started to think about what songs, and the first song was the one I was telling you about, which is called Drone, and that was the one that really came very much from my kid. And all of the other songs really sort of grew out of that in a very natural way. As I wrote each song, I had a very definite idea for who I wanted to play on it. I had the rhythm section from my touring band, and that's Frank Tonto on drums and Tony Remy on rhythm guitar. And then I felt that I would bring in different guests for different songs. And I was very lucky in that I was able to get all those people to come and contribute, from Phil Manzanera, Uli John Roth, my son Malcolm Bruce on guitar, Bernie Marsden, who I love very much. And then, of course, from one of the other bands that I play in, I have Cindy Blackman Santana on drums and John Medeski on organ. And I have to make sure that I haven't... Oh, and of course, Robin Trower. As soon as I wrote the riff for that Rusty Lady, which is kind of more of a traditional, for me, kind of blues rock thing, I just thought that's Robin. When I wrote Candlelight, my wife wrote the words for that. I just set it to music, and then I knew that I wanted to get Phil Manzanera on guitar, because it had that kind of Caribbean feel about it. And he's really into that music, Cuban music and so on, because we played together in Cuba a couple of years ago.
We know Phil mainly for being a Roxy Music guide.
Yeah, he's done a lot of very fine things outside of Roxy Music. I first met him in an event called Legends of the Guitar, I think it was called, which is a very interesting thing. It has a lot of guitar players on it, and he was playing with me and Bob Dylan, people like that. That's how I got to meet him the first time. Malcolm's a great guitar player as well as being a great bass player. I really like his guitar playing. That's why I have him on one of the tracks, a track called Don't Look Now, on the new album on Silver Rails. And he plays a lovely solo on that. Another nice thing about the album is that 7 of the 10 songs are co-written with Pete Brown. My old cohort, we wrote I Feel Free, White Room, Sunshine of Your Love, all those Cream songs we wrote together. And so great to be still working with him. And I think he's really come across with the goods on this album. It's fantastic lyrics.
You've been writing with him for a very, very long time, Jack.
Yeah, these lyrics for this album, I think, are some of the best he's ever written. So it shows you that you don't have to be a kid to write good stuff. To be creative, you can do it anytime you want.
Exactly.
If you've got the talent and if you've got the guts to do it, really, that's what it takes.
So, Jack, you off to promote the album? Are you playing live around town in Europe, or what are your plans?
Well, I was going to be doing few dates in the UK around about now, but I went and got a really bad case of the flu a few weeks ago, and it's taken me ages to recover from. It's just been going around in Britain, and it just knocks you back. So I've had to postpone the little tour that I was doing. I will be rescheduling that. I just want to make the next album because I so enjoyed working at Abbey Road Studios, working with Rob Cass, the great producer at Abbey Road Studios, and all the great people there. So I just want to make my next record. Already started writing that before this one's even out. Very excited about that. Silver Rails, the new album, comes out on vinyl and, normal CD, and then a CD with a DVD, the making of DVD, which is directed by my daughter Kyla, who's a very talented filmmaker. So it was also a family affair. That was another nice thing about it.
And you got Margaret to write some of the lyrics as well?
She wrote the lyrics for Candlelight, that one song.
You mentioned
I wrote some of the lyrics myself, and Pete Brown, and also Kip Hanrahan that I worked with. Yeah, I'm very proud of the album, very happy with it.
Great, Jack.
Very excited about it.
Well, look, we wish you the best. We'll be playing it here. We'll be playing lots of tracks.
A couple of days ago it came out. I remember that well.
Yes. It's also available on iTunes and Amazon for all our listeners. Jack, good luck with it. I know you're very proud of it.
Thanks very much, Dick. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to talk over those old times and new times.
We wish you well. You have got a lot of fans here in Australia.
That's fabulous. I want to say thanks to all those fans, because I know they are there, and I haven't managed to get to Australia yet, but I haven't given up.
No, well...
I haven't given up hope yet.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
All the best to you.
See ya.